Hello, it's Barry Rodriguez here, the non-icon. Time for another book review, and a very enjoyable one by Tom Clavin called Bandit Heaven. The Hole-in-the-Wall Gangs and the Final Chapter of the Wild West. It's a very interesting book. In that time in the 1880s, and when you still had a lot of open range, and you had where cattle rustling and horse stealing was as common as shoplifting is nowadays. You had characters like Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. And what stood them apart is they were more organized about how they conducted their operations. But there were so many of these loosely put together gangs. And then you had big cattlemen and the Cattlemen Association hiring people that could be they could be killers one day and sheriffs another day. It wasn't for most of the part of time when Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid and Kid Curry and all these other characters operate. There wasn't organized law enforcement until William Pinkerton agencies became involved, and so this is very interesting to read. At least to me, because I'm a big fan of Western movies, and you see these things in Western movies where the big cattle owners force out the homesteaders, and then you have the shootouts in the street, and it all came from somewhere. It's based on stuff, and this is the kind of things they talk about in this book. There was a movie, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, with Robert Redford and Paul Newman. And a lot of things in that movie, and Catherine Ross was in that movie, were based on true events. These guys were Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid and other gangs, but the more organized robberies were doing by Butch Cassidy. They would rob trains. They'd stop the train and disconnect the cars. And yes, like in the movie, they used too much dynamite to blow up the car where the safes are, where the monies were. A couple times they'd blew up the whole damn car. And so this was all based on something. And then you had famous lawmen and going across the panorama here, you had Wyatt Earp, you had Bat Masterson, you had a lot of fellows, and there's mentions of Tom Horn, and movies been made about Tom Horn and other people, but this kind of chronicles the evolution of a time when there was open range, and you had hangouts where these wrestlers and all kinds of characters could hang out in the Brown's Hole or the Hole in the Wall or Robert's Roost. These were like bandit sanctuaries, usually situated in an area where you could see people coming for miles. You could post sentries, and you knew when law enforcement was coming, and then most of the time, law enforcement wouldn't even venture into these sanctuaries because there's nothing but bandits and people hanging out after pulling bank jobs. So it was a very interesting book, and then it details how, when you had the William Pinkerton agency, you had this guy named Siringo, one of their top agents, and they started having a telegraph. It became more and more difficult for all these rustlers and bandits to operate, because now there's communication going on. And in the case of Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid, you know, they realized this, their time was running out, so they went to Argentina, they were in Chile, and but sooner or later, all these characters, you know, the law or fate or whatever catches up with them. But this is a good read. You know, it's there's just so many people it talks about, and then there's all those usual things. You know, you have the shootouts, you have the brothels, you have gambling. But most of these characters didn't live too long, or sooner or later, they'd beat the rap in one state, they'd go to another state, and they could not break their habits. That's the life they were used to, the independent, you know, on the range. Once in a while, they take a job working on someone's ranch, but then inevitably they'd come back and rob a bank, or they'd run out of money, or they'd just get the wandering lust. And this is the way it was. This is the way the Wild West was, and then it became tame like everything else. Telegraphs, you had cars come in, you had more organized law enforcement, a lot of political pressure, but just like all this stuff you see in these fictional westerns, the cattle barons, the gunslingers, the greedy people, Indians, yes, that's a lot of mention of Indians. The Indians are a big part of this, the West, and what was going on here and what was talked about, you know, in this book. This is how it was. You didn't just have to worry about bandits or law or the cavalry or what thing. You had to worry about everything. And so on a daily basis, anything could happen. So once again, I recommend this book. And I've read other books on Wyatt Earp and all the other characters, but this is a very interesting read and gives you a taste of how it really was during this time. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was mentioned here. A lot of very wealthy people from England invested in huge ranches. So there's a lot to talk about in this book. So I encourage all of you to just keep on reading. It's much more interesting than just television or, you know, the movies. This is the meat, where it came from, what's the basis for all these colorful things. So adios and happy trails until my next book review, and peace and love.